Was Thailand a culture shock for you, or is it things similar?
I mean, it was, I think when you're that young, even to, nothing really felt like a shock, I feel, because also Hawaii was different from Bangladesh.
Sure,
and what has been, maybe this is the better way to answer, which is, I've always been a foreigner in any environment. In Bangladesh, I'm a foreigner because we're culturally not Bengali.
Right.
And then also even physically, we don't look like what traditionally is, Bengali features physically.
Yeah.
And so everywhere I have been, people have reminded me of my alleged difference. So that's the way I've grown up. Of always being told that you are different, which has actually been, instead of feeling alienated, it's actually been very positively informing. It kind of gave me free rein to then author my own personality.
That's interesting.
And lean into it. Lean in. If I am so different as you are always telling me that I am, I'm going to go full out with that.
It's interesting. We had Frank Miles on the show a while back, and he was talking about being black and on like Tinder, and he says it's tough because you get people that either fetishize the difference or ostracize it. So he went on one date. He went on one date, and the guy goes, "Oh, sorry, I'm just not into black guys." And he goes, "Wait a minute, what does that mean?"
Exactly.
Right? And then he goes, no, don't worry. I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine because he's totally really into black guys. And he goes, well, what does that mean?
Well, it means because all black guys are the same.
Right. And so there's an identity crushing aspect to that. And so I wonder if you can maybe talk to, as you've grown and going into modeling and in acting, right? I think you experience both, right? You experience the sort of typecasting sort of limitations that come along with that, and then there's also the fetishizing of it as well, and both things are dehumanizing. Very
much so, very dehumanizing. But I just want to speak a little bit more about how you asked about the impact of growing up in those cultures in Thailand and Bangladesh. The biggest impact was I was always cognizant from a very young age, which maybe other people are not privy to this kind of information or saturation of information in the way we were, which is women have such little agency in this world. I had constant reminders of this.
No matter where you were, that was a constant.
That was a constant.
Bangladesh, Thailand, Hawaii, New York.
Well, and especially as a young girl in Bangladesh and in Thailand, everywhere I turned, I was being personally reminded of this. I would see it socially. I would see it in my family structure. Wow. And so it all informed my belief that I grew up with that women are given such little voice in this world. I have to do something about it. I mean, there's this one, it's such a gift growing up in so many different cultures because you're exposed to a worldview that were you to be raised in a bubble, you're not exposed to. The only way you start asking questions is if there's something triggered it, if something in your environment triggered the question. Otherwise, you just live in Pleasantville.
Right.
And so I was constantly asking all these questions, and questions that, from a young age, at 6 years old, where does poverty come from? How does that happen? What is it? Why are some people mean to other people because of their skin color? I mean, things like that. I was always asking my mom and father about those things, and they're both humanitarians. My mother is a teacher, and my father is a diplomat with the United Nations, and now he's retired, but he does consultancy work too, and they are tried and true humanitarians and activists.
Sounds like education is also very important.
Huge. Especially, I think any of us who are a quote-unquote minority culture, we are raised with the belief that education is your ticket to freedom. And this world is very, very cruel, and your only way to succeed and survive with your spirit intact is for you to do it on your own terms, for you to learn the tools you need to emotionally and intellectually to achieve that freedom from the tangible, cruel world, walk through it. Yeah, and I remember, my parents were always answering my questions, like even about poverty. I would ask them when we would go back home to Bangladesh, and it's a place unlike any other, where it's third world, and the sounds and sights and smells and everything. It's a saturation of information you won't get anywhere else, like the sewage and the calls from the beggars and the kind of physical landscape, like the images you're seeing of the nearly dead and the starving and the poor and in rags, like and there are beggars everywhere. And it starts like the moment you get off the airplane, you're hit with this heat, and it's like sitting inside of a mouth.
Wow.
And you see you see droves of people just watching the foreigners come out of the airport, because we are aliens. We are this kind of reminder of a world beyond. That's what foreigners are.
Yeah.
And so people, and you just see thousands and thousands of bodies. Like, we are a tiny, overpopulated country.
Wow.
And so you get into the car, and because of the poor urban planning, the car moves. It takes 4 hours to make a 10-mile drive, kind of thing. And there are beggars running up to you at all times, and people with amputees and polio survivors, and so I was fortunate in that I was exposed to all of this from such a younger age. From the time I was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I would always ask questions and my parents would answer. And
no honeymoon period.
Yeah. And I also remember that in Bangladesh, being aware of, there's something about being a girl or a woman. Apparently, we're not supposed to be doing certain things that my brother is allowed to do, or my father is allowed to say. I'm supposed to wear different clothes in Bangladesh than I am as a young girl in Thailand. I remember having just like very elementary thoughts, like ever since I was 6 years old, like, oh, there's something about me being female that means that the world wants me to behave differently. There's a different set of rules that I'm supposed to abide by. And in Bangladesh, women and men live very much separate lives, where even in social gatherings, we're put into different rooms.
Wow.
Because, men are going to be talking about politics and literature and art and government, and women are expected to talk about caretaking and cooking. And God forbid we were put into the same room, because that infers that we would have things to talk about on the same level of intelligence.
So you've obviously bucked against that in your life. And so, I mean, one of the things you said that got a great laugh from the crowd, and when you were introducing your piece at Burnt Tongue, you were asking if you were close enough to the microphone, if people could hear you, and people are saying, get a little closer, and you said, well, I'm going to get louder. And then you said, I usually say that at the beginning of relationships too, right? And that made us all crack up as a kind of warning, that the timidity is not something that people are going to experience with you. And so I guess I wonder, I mean, there's no question from me why you started to buck against that. But has your family, has your parents responded? Like, what do your mother and father think of the fact that you don't just go to you're not just going to go to the room with the women and talk about childcare? Have they accepted that aspect?
They have. Absolutely. My parents are very supportive of not just what I do, but who it is I am.
Okay.
And yes, we have. My father and I used to butt heads when I was younger, because I think it is very intimidating to be faced with this young girl child who is adamantly against.
The program,
yes, who's not about to abide by the rules, and.
I bet secretly he was happy.
Well, we've gone back and forth, and it's a relationship, right? And so it has been a lifelong growing process and learning process, and we are definitely we're now closer than we have ever been.
Wow.
And that has been a lot of work.
I bet.
Yeah, and the book is, I'm Yours has so much about that relationship, because it is, my relationship with my father, like my relationship with my mother, two biggest contributing influences, right?
I've heard you speak about your mother's influence on your art and life, and how profound that is. The sacrifices she made to allow you to pursue some of the things you pursued.
And being an outspoken girl, I think all of those experiences that I would have when I was observing that women were being told to speak less or to speak at all, right? And it has just been more fuel for my fire, and informed and shaped like who it is I'm supposed to be and my purpose. And I remember, when I was 11 years old, a memory really sticks out, which is I remember finding out about a cousin of mine. He had been molesting a lot of my cousins, and he was one of the oldest in our group of cousins. And another cousin told me that, this is what he does. And I remember, so I was 11 when I was told that, and I remember, but my entire life, always sensing that he did that, because through survival instinct that children have, I would always leave the room whenever he entered. If I was there by myself reading or drawing, and he would come into a room, I would make sure I would either leave or just call out like, "Mama, I need your help with something." Because I could always sense it the way that farmers sense an incoming storm, and they know to cover their crops against danger. I always knew he was a storm. And then I was told of, what he would do. And I remember getting, of course, so furious. And I went to the patriarch of our family to let him know this was happening, and that, of course, he must take action. And the patriarch told me, boys will be boys. Don't be foolish. Boys will be boys. And it happens especially between cousins. And if I had managed to remain innocent at all up till that moment, that was my final, any tiny trace that was left over of innocence left. It felt like I swallowed a piece of myself.
Terry Tempest Williams says at one point the price of obedience had become too high.
Yes, exactly. And I remember having such a pivotal moment in my development, which was, he's not going to speak, so I must. I will be a voice for those without one. And that sentence has been not only like my vow, but it's also been a faith that has kept me protected. Anytime something bad has happened in my life, and there have been doozies, that sentence, this almost irrational belief, or irrational amount of faith in this belief that I have to be a voice for others, has kept me alive and has kept me going. And, I think there is a fine line between insanity and faith, or insanity and art. You have to believe so much in order to keep going. And whether that's beautiful or insane, it really doesn't matter as long as you keep going. And it is moments like that and sentences like that that have just actually helped me keep going.